Hi guys, thanks for watching PB Shifu. This is going to be a maintenance video on the Tippmann 98 Custom. Now this Tippmann 98 Custom has a Cyclone kit on it, so what we want to do early on is to detach the Cyclone kit so that the gun can actually lie flat while we're working on it. To do so, I'm going to release it with the latch over here, slide it back, and it comes right off. It's pretty simple. Now the one thing you want to do here is you want to remove the hose that's connected to the Cyclone kit and not to the body, which is relatively easy. Alright, see that? Paint's got there, you got to clean it. This was actually used 2-3 months back and hasn't gotten its proper cleaning, so we'll be doing that today as well. You need a 1/8 Allen key for all the screws except for the velocity screw. The velocity screw uses a 532 Allen key. Now, keep in mind that there are two screws on the opposite side that have to be removed before removing the power tube inside. I'll talk about the Cyclone kit on the 98 a little bit later after the maintenance of this marker. Alright. So now we're going to remove all this Allen screws one at a time. Make sure you set them all. They're all the same, so it doesn't really matter if you mix them up. With the exception of the one here on a foregrip, that one's actually a longer screw. So for most people who are getting into paintball, this is actually a great gun to work with because it's so easily maintained. Now, it's not easily maintained on the field, but it is very easily maintained at home. And it is a very cheap gun to buy. If you're beginning to play paintball and you like Tippmanns and you know you're going to play the sport a lot, I would highly recommend getting an A5, or if you really have the money to spend, get yourself an X7. The X7 does come in a mechanical kit and a electric kit, so if you're more confident in your skills of repairing and things like that, you might want to look into an electrical kit, as it does have the option of not using a battery as well, although it is $100 more expensive. So 5 short screws, 1 long one for the foregrip. Foregrip fell out, apparently. Not too much to worry about. What to worry about is when you open this is a clamshell design, so the gun actually opens in half. You want to be very careful because there is a spring in the back over here with a stopper, so you want to try to catch that. What you might need to do is loosen up the ASA over here, because the way Tippmann designs their guns, there's actually a bolt within the grip that holds it in, and that does lend some force into keeping the marker together. So now we got it separated. A couple of things you want to keep an eye out for. This is the little notch that holds in your Cyclone feed. This is the power tube, forward bolt, back bolt, and this is the spring I was talking about, being held in by the stopper. Spring pin. Here's a sear, O-ring, which goes in between the spring, and the detent. Remember, the detent always looks like a ramp that goes forward, like you're jumping out of the gun. So what you want to do is, in order to clean this, you want to be careful of this bar up here. So you're going to pull this back and lift it, and then pull it forward and lift the forward board out. That's it. Now, this doesn't really need to be maintained. If you want to, you can take it out by these two screws here. Now, as I said, you should be very careful because a lot of these things are very loose, which is the reason why I hate Tippmanns and their clamshell designs. One thing I almost forgot is this spring, which holds this piece and gives it tension. These pins also fall out, which go right there. All these pins can be removed, which you have to be very careful with when playing around with Tippmanns. All these pins are essential to the function of the marker. As you can see, they're very easily removed. And here's another spring, which is why Tippmann design is terrible. Okay, all those removed. With the way this particular Tippmann is set up, this steel braid, I would highly recommend changing this into a macro line, as it would make maintaining this a lot easier. Only because you can pull the macro line right out, and then you can remove the power tube if you really need to. But the power tube doesn't really have to come out whenever you're cleaning it. So other than that, that is the separation of the marker. What we're going to do now is we're going to rinse it all with soapy water, dry it up, make sure it's completely dry, and put it back together. Alright guys, I have everything rinsed off, and now we're going to wipe everything down, make it nice and dry. What you will need this portion is gun oil. Gun oil is for all the O-rings. With mechanical markers, gun oil is generally the lubricant of choice. So what we're going to do is we're going to dry up the internals first, as that has to be the most dry, and then we'll work on the outside afterwards. For spaces that you can't reach with paper towel, you could use a Q-tip if you feel it's not dry enough. But for the most part, a paper towel is more than sufficient. I'm going to get the inside first, then wipe out the outside. Now, one thing to keep note is these Tippmann guns are generally painted, so with use you'll see that there's paint chips and things like that. What you can do, if you really want it to look better, is you can actually, at this point during maintenance, you can actually plug all the holes, right, and actually use some spray paint and just paint over it, which isn't hard. That's just to keep the marker looking new. Make sure you get the insides as dry as possible. Pay more attention to the inside than you do on the outside, because the outside can be wet. It's not a big deal when you put it back together, but the inside should definitely be as dry as humanly possible. Now, if you're in a real rush, you want to wipe this down real quick, could probably use a hairdryer, put on hot, make sure it's supremely dry. So I used one towel for the body. I'm going to use a different paper towel for the bolt parts, only because those are the moving parts and you want those to be dried very well so that the gun oil, you can get a much better coverage. Make sure you get inside here. And you see, there's not a lot of O-rings that you really need to pay attention to. There's only one O-ring here, and there's one O-ring here, although it looks kind of like the bolt, but there's an O-ring there. You see that? That's wear of the bolt. That's why you have to maintain your guns after every play. A lot of people tell you Tippmanns don't have to be cleaned, but the more you clean your gun, the better it'll perform whenever you need it to. Alright, so that's it. That's all the cleaning. We can put all those pieces aside. What you want to do is you want to lay the right side of the receiver with the inside up. The left side of the receiver you can put aside because you won't be needing it. Did it dry the Cyclone feed? Not too much of an issue. I really just threw this in water and rinsed it out. Most of this is plastic, so it won't rust. But you still want to make sure that it's completely dry. But if it's not dry, it's not too much of an issue, as it doesn't really affect how the marker performs. This is just a feed mechanism. Well, a lot of people don't realize it with the Cyclone feed. Maybe you don't, maybe you do, but if you ever get a ball stuck in there, you can always press this button and it'll turn the Cyclone feed. Just so you know, helps out a lot. Okay, so now for the reassembly of the marker. You want to make sure these two square nuts are back here for the ASA. Right? And the trigger. It's got a square flat piece which goes on top, and nut that goes there. These pins are all the same. One's black, the others are silver, but the black one usually goes over here. It's not really an issue. One thing that you might get confused is because there is an extra hole here, a pin actually doesn't go there. What you can do to remind yourself of where these pins go is to actually put the trigger in. Now a pin goes here. If you put the trigger in, you'll notice that it'll align with all these pins. You want to make sure. See that? There was a hole there, but there's no hole in the trigger. Now, this is the trigger spring, which goes in the front of the trigger, which gives you tension when you pull the trigger. On the sear, you want to make sure the sear is here, and it's facing back. And this is the sear spring, which hooks onto the back right here, and to this pin right here. So you want to stretch it out a little bit, and it'll give the sear some tension. There you go. Might be a little tricky, but it's not too bad. And that gives the sear tension, so that when the bolt blows back, it catches. Alright, so that's all the pins. That's all the complex portions of bolt. Now, what you want to do now is you want to oil your O-rings and put your bolt in. So 1 drop of oil per O-ring is sufficient. You don't really need a ton of oil. Oil is pretty good. So 1 drop, make sure it goes all the way around. Make sure it goes all the way around. You can oil the rest of the bolt too if you want. I usually do that after I put the bolt in the marker, only because that's just the way I do things. So you want to put the front bolt in, put this face up, so that you can easily put the bolt guide in this thing. You want to make sure this angled piece faces forward. This is the front of the bolt, and you can see through that. That's for the cocking lever, which goes here. Same thing, you want to face the hole up front so that you can put the bolt guides, the front of the bolt and the back of the bolt together, and rotate it in place. That's it. That's in. Now, at this point, you might want to oil the rest of the metal part of the bolt. You don't have to oil this, though. So, just to give it a smoother surface, you can oil different parts of the bolt. Usually a good idea, just to prevent wear. So, this is the rear sight. Goes right there. And these are the pieces of the spring. So you want to put the spring in first. Then you want to put this O-ring. This O-ring doesn't have to be oiled. It just goes in there. It's more of a cushion than anything else. And then you want to put the spring pin. And finally you want to put the back cap on. The back cap, there's a lot of holes there, but it's the center hole that fits the spring. And there's a notch here, and that's it. I forgot the cocking rod. This has to go in prior to the spring. Now the hole has to face the back of the gun. That way the spring can go through it, and the spring pin can go through it. One of the last things that you need to attach, there's also a pin over here, which you have to be very careful not to lose. This one's a little tricky only because this spring attaches this way. There's a little, I don't know if you can see it, but this piece goes upward, and you want to make sure that goes in here. That little piece is on top. You want to make sure there's a hole here, and that goes on that little piece so that it gives it tension when it's not depressed. And there you go. That's one piece that has to be very careful. One thing I almost forgot, the detent. Detent should always be ramped forward, like as if it was jumping out of the gun. And that goes in this little notch right here. And with everything put together, I reassemble the marker. It doesn't have to be forced, it should drop in place. So there's no reason for you to squeeze hard or anything. And look, it fell off. One of the reasons why you have to be very careful with that particular piece. This is tedious at first, but it does eventually get easier and easier as you do them. Okay. Now, attempt number 2. Okay. Everything's flush. What you want to do is you want to put some of them, put in all the screws that are in the corners first. That'll help you align everything easier. It doesn't have to be too tight. Hand tightened is good. Don't over tighten these bolts. There's really no reason to over tighten them. There's so many screws here that this thing stays pretty tight. very simple assembly. It's just a lot of pieces you have to keep track of, especially a new player. This does seem like a lot. Last thing, you want to put this in. This slides right in. Long screw, said before, goes right in. And it's complete. The last thing you want to do is, if you have the Cyclone, you want to make sure you reattach it. So you can reattach it first, and all it does is it just clips in, and you just reattach the hose over here. It's worth a mention that the Cyclone is actually a $70 upgrade, but it does come with the hopper for it, so you don't have to buy a Cyclone hopper for it. So when you buy the kit, now since it's a $70 upgrade, at this point, if you decide to get the Cyclone, you might want to consider either getting an electro hopper, depending on what type of upgrade path you plan on doing in the future. If you plan on getting an electronic gun, then perhaps an electronic hopper would be more suited towards your future needs. If you don't care for an electronic hopper, then getting the Cyclone feed is fantastic because it prevents ball chopping, and you don't need batteries. Alright, now it's cleaned and has a lot less paint on it, which is fantastic. Alright, thanks for watching.